You.
Go ahead.
Can everyone see my screen? Okay. Trish, will you please start recording for me? Thank you. My name is Catherine Bohrer, and I will be presenting my capstone project. I am actually presenting from here in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I just finished my student teaching experience in a second grade classroom at Lakeview Elementary. A little overview for my capstone project. The overall focus is really on engagement. This is important to me because as I've been reflecting on teachers that I had in elementary schools and teachers that I've been able to observe and thinking about why they stood out to me or why specific lessons stood out to me, I really realized they were classrooms and lessons that I could be involved in. And so I was really interested in what I was learning and really valued what I was being taught. And since that meant a lot to me, it's something I've continuously thought about when reflecting on the kind of teacher that I want to be. In my capstone project, I have 3 different artifacts or pieces of learning. The first is learning, the second is planning, the third is application, and I will talk about these more as we progress. My competency statement is I'm competent at engaging students in a lesson in order to help them take ownership of their learning. The theme this falls under is theories of learning and their roles in teaching, and I had 2 guiding questions when really thinking about this process. The first, how can a teacher apply learning and/or developmental theories to best practices? I really thought about the different theories I've learned about, such as integrating movement or using visuals, and how this could actually be done in the classroom. And the second, how can a teacher engage and motivate learners? For this question, I used a lot of trial and error and was able to realize what students enjoy doing and what seems to keep them engaged, but also when they're the most motivated to continue their learning. This brings me to my first piece of evidence, my evidence of learning. This was my self-evaluation that I did after I taught my first lesson. It was from TAC 297A, so my very first practicum at Friedstrom. And in this practicum, I did not plan or use any sort of hook for my lesson, and I didn't understand the importance of engagement until following the lesson. It shows in my self-evaluation, I stated that I really wanted to capture their attention. So it shows that I recognized I should have started with something that got their attention or got them excited. But since I didn't plan for this, it left them to think that what they were doing was just a boring worksheet. And following that, they didn't really think about the importance. It was a lesson over subtraction. So they weren't really thinking about why it was useful to them. This relates to my theme because it shows I really underestimated the importance of engagement and the impact that it has on a student's learning. And so I said when teaching again, I wanted to relate it to them and think of some real world problems where maybe they would actually use subtraction. And following this lesson, I really just wanted to think of ways that I could engage learners and motivate them more because I realized this did have an impact on their learning. And this takes me to my second piece of evidence, my evidence of planning. For this, I want to highlight 2 different artifacts. The first is my health and wellness portfolio from TAC 380, which I took in the spring of 2017 prior to entering Teachers College. And then the second is an assigned article from SPED 401A that I took during my math block semester. Both of these highlight different instructional strategies, the portfolio being the importance of movement, and the assigned article regarding the benefits of graphic organizers. During these classes, when learning about how to incorporate movement and graphic organizers, I kind of had my aha moment and started to think, oh, these are ways that I can engage students, and having their attention is important because they're more likely to learn, remember what they're learning, and then be motivated to learn more in the future. This supports my theme and competency statement because I was finally able to learn and identify some of those ways that I could engage students and motivate them more in order to give them some of those opportunities to take ownership in their learning. And I really just started to think about if I don't have their attention, then they're not learning, they're not focused, they're not motivated, and they're not going to see why this is important for the future. So at this point, I was able to identify these strategies. However, I was still hesitant to use them in the classroom and wasn't sure the best way to implement them in the classroom either. This brings me to my evidence of application. Here there's actually 3 different artifacts. These are all from student teaching this semester. The first is a poster that we actually had a little tune to and we made up actions for, so incorporating some of that movement within the classroom. And it was a reminder that they used for place value. The second, the ice cream cones there are manipulatives that we've actually used for a couple different things, but it was for a hook portion of our math lesson. And then there's also a graphic organizer there for comparing numbers. It was really fun teaching lessons that involved these different things. For the ice cream cones, students were really excited to be helpers. They were really engaged right away, and this was the perfect opportunity to introduce some vocabulary and background information and also have them listening and motivated because they wanted to know what we would be talking about with starting with that. And then the reminder, the poster that we used, it was a lot of fun to do the actions with the kids, and they would ask if we could do it again just to remind them when we were doing different problems. So it was fun to see them use these tools as they continued their learning. And the graphic organizer really gives them that opportunity to take ownership of their own learning. We go through it together as partners, but then they have to put their own examples too and usually share it with friends or table groups. And so that gives them the opportunity. They need to understand what they're doing. They need to be able to fill it out, and this shows them why that's important. So this shows that I was able to apply these engagement strategies, movement, and using the graphic organizers in a lesson in order to motivate the students and help deepen their understanding, but also giving them that opportunity to really take ownership in their learning. As far as my synthesis and big ideas, I really thought about where I started, where I'm at now, and how I've grown throughout that process. Ultimately, I didn't plan or use a hook, and I didn't really understand the importance of engagement. That led me to being able to identify ways to engage and motivate learners. However, I still wasn't really sure how to implement these. And that brings me to today, where I can incorporate these engagement strategies to engage and motivate the students. And this left me with 2 big ideas. The first is that hooks are an important part of a lesson because it engages students immediately while grabbing their attention and setting a purpose for learning. And setting that purpose is really what motivates students to keep going. They know that it's important for them to learn. And then the second big idea is students are engaged and motivated to learn if they can be active participants in the learning process. And similarly, if students know that if they can be involved and they can see that it's important, then they want to keep going. And this led me to my own little formula of engagement plus motivation equals ownership of learning. As far as my reflection, I've thought about this before, but I've really been thinking about it since this is what my capstone project is, the focus is on. What have I learned about myself? I'm more engaged and motivated when I understand the purpose of what I'm learning too. When I know that it can be applied later or that I will be using it, it is more important to me, and that allows me to take ownership of my learning. What have I learned about teaching and my students? When students are given the ability to move and use graphic organizers, they're excited and they want to learn. So they really are motivated and they want to keep going because they want to be a part of that process. Continuing on, something I've learned about my theme is that teachers should take advantage of resources and research and incorporate effective strategies whenever possible. So like I said, in my evidence of planning, it was really easy to identify some of these ways to engage students, but actually incorporating them within lessons. There are limitations to my competency statement. Just because most students are engaged does not mean all students are engaged, and some still may not take ownership of their learning. And I think this can really be applied a lot of areas within education. Students are all unique. They're all different. They all have different interests, and this isn't any different than that. And something I still want to learn or improve on, I still need to learn how to incorporate these strategies into other subjects as well as techniques to use across grade levels. So I'm really comfortable using these strategies in subjects like math, or I'm really comfortable with my little second graders, but I know this would look different in a kindergarten classroom or fifth grade classroom. Moving forward, I want to continue using engagement strategies such as movement and graphic organizers. I also want to continue to learn through research and various techniques that other teachers use, especially through observations, different professional development meetings. And I also want to brainstorm ways to incorporate strategies throughout all subject areas, and also to brainstorm ways that I can use this in other grades or be a resource for others looking for these engagement strategies. In closing, my artifacts demonstrate my growth in understanding the importance of engagement and the role that it plays in learning. When thinking about this, it's really just that if students are engaged, then they're motivated. And if they're motivated, that allows them the opportunity to take ownership of their own learning. And also something that has been really important to me when thinking about this, it's essential to use these engagement strategies. They're not just something fun to take up extra time, but they're genuinely important for students to take ownership of their own learning, because if it's important to them, then they will remember as they go on. That is all that I have for my project. Do you have any questions for me?
Hi, Kate. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about, hooking them right at the beginning, kind of engaging. Let's say you have a really long lesson and all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I'm losing them. What are some things that you do to bring them back to engagement?
Well, I think even going back to what we used for the hook and being able to tie it into that and just having so for example, the ice cream cones, what we did there first, they were just they were comparing, but if that was losing them later on, and I wanted to bring it back to that, I would still use some of those same vocabulary words. So maybe which one has the least amount of scoops, or which one has the most amount of scoops, or the greatest amount of scoops, and bringing that back in there to tie it into something engaging that they want to do. So they love being helpers with that, and bringing it back to that, and then continue going so you have their attention again.
Thank you.
Yeah.